and Sean Sexton's great-great-great-grandfather very briefly won the Pacific Cup as the Charles Stewart Parnell Gaelic football team in 1892-1893. So with my nephew Hugo helping on the projection, I'm just going to welcome George McAuliffe.
I have learned through experience that the safest way to talk is to speak about that which is in my heart. I can never be that way, then contradicted. So I would like to say that starting off, it would be impossible for me to overestimate that sense of gratitude and appreciation and thankfulness to faith that I'm here tonight, speaking to a gathering of the Cronins, because I say it would be impossible for me also to overestimate the respect and meaning the footballing Cronins had for me as a youngster. I'm very proud of the fact that in one way I'm a bit unique here in Milltown, in that I must be, with the Cronins, the only people from Milltown to have won East Kerry Championship medals with this stride. So that's a big fella. Now the big difference was that the Cronin footballers were operating up at that level. I was operating down at this level. But be that as it may, it is a link we had immediately when I saw, the history of the Cronins. I'm firmly convinced, you see, that at any stage in the existence of an individual, or a community, or a nation, we are the confluence of the coming together of many different streams and different factors. As it is with individuals, so it is with communities. And in the merging of the Irish nation to what it is today, it would be, as I say again, difficult to overestimate the significance of the GAA in that process. And in the GAA, it would be impossible to distance the GAA from the heroes that made it. And high up, and amongst those heroes, were the footballing Cronins from Lyon. There might be other Cronins around, but for me, it was the footballing. Hey! Now, I have sadly an admission to make. Much and all as I tried, I failed to find any trace of a Cronin in my own pedigree. Oh. So, strictly speaking, one could disqualify me at this point from speaking about them. But I don't feel disqualified because in some way the footballing Cronins of Lyon were not just the property of Milltown or of Lyon or indeed the Cronins. They were the property of Kerry. They were household names in Munster and all over Ireland. So they did not just confine their influence to the locality. These were men who, with their ability in the field of play and their courage under pressure, set themselves apart from the generality. And I must take this opportunity to really applaud them and express my appreciation and gratitude to them. I have a son who's in Cork.
Hey! Hey! Up Cork!
But I just maybe tell one little story about Cork. There was a famous Kerry footballer once, and he used to say whatever it was about Cork, you would never get tired of beating them. Again, another little similarity with the Cronins, and I really was excited when I was reading up that when I was a youngster, the early 50s, I went to school in Cork, in Douglas in Cork. I had a brother, an uncle, presentation brother teaching there. And the big heroes that I held in Cork in the early 50s were again the Cronin brothers. I remember as a youngster being at county championship matches when they were playing the Cronins of Barracks. And for us, young Kerrymen in Cork, it was to be proud that we had these mighty men representing us on the football field of Cork. I also, I'm really pleased about the fact that a few years later, in the 1960s, I myself was winning a county championship medal with Cork. So I again have another thing in common with the Cronins, that we are all holders of Cork County Championship medals. So you're not listening to muck here. I joke of course, because but that is the similarity. Now I saw by your documents that in 1831 a party Cronin was born in Milltown. 10 years later, 41, Margaret Foley Glencar. I believe that in order to understand the present, we must obviously visit the past. I think it's, as a teacher, I couldn't imagine making any attempted explanation of the present without doing it that way. I believe it is important to bow to the past without being bound to the past. And it is to the credit of the GAA and the credit of men like the Cronins that they succeeded in elevating the people of Kerry up out of the trauma of history to a level where men who had been fighting against each other in the 1920s were together playing football together in the 30s, and in that way they did a service to this country and this county that only future generations will be retelling. Maybe it's a bit too near yet to spell out the significance of the GAA in County Kerry during the years after 1920. But to go back to the 1831 and 1841, the island these were born into was an island which was 30 years or 31 years into a new way of relationship with the world. Because on the 1st of January 1801, the Irish Parliament disappeared from the planet Earth. It was voted out of existence because the British were becoming fearful that these strange doctrines from France about liberty, equality and fraternity were contaminating the Irish people and were in danger of widening the gap between England and Ireland. So they decided to eliminate one of these risk factors, and that was eliminate the Irish Parliament. So an Irish Parliament which had existed up until the year 1801 voted itself out of existence. Some of you might remember, Agnes down there might remember, we learned at school poetry, and one of the lines of poetry I remember to this day was, "How did they pass the Union? By perjury and fraud, by men who sold their land for gold, as Judas sold his God." So this Parliament was voted out of existence. So the history of Ireland from that time to the present day is a succession of attempts to try to reverse the work that was done in the disappearance of that Parliament. One could describe loosely the attitude of England towards Ireland around that time was a choice between assimilating the island people or exterminating the island people. And in some ways the famine did a very significant work in reducing the population of Ireland. It also was responsible in the late 40s of the beginning of a hemorrhage of Irish residents all over the world. We talk about the Parnet Cup in the western coast of America. I can assure you that if you got the history of the individuals in that photograph, you would find that these men and women were descendants, or some of them themselves, survivors from the famine. So the famine had a huge impact in reducing the population of Ireland. It also had, in some way, a beneficial effect for many of the people who survived. So that our people were disappearing from the island, our language was disappearing from the island, our games had gone from the island, we were in danger of becoming, and the hope was that we might become, as a famous writer said, descending into the anonymity of an English shire. We were just on the verge of descending to the level of a shire like Lancashire or Yorkshire, losing our identity, our games, our language, our people in the process. And it was in that milieu that the GAA came into being. The great English historian Macaulay, Lord Macaulay, not McAuliffe, Lord Macaulay said once, there is nothing more irresistible than an idea that has found its time. I think it was Patrick Pearse later who said, you can chain my body, but you can't change shape my ideas. Ideas are powerful instruments of promoting movements, and in Ireland, the GAA began the process which results in us being here tonight celebrating mighty men of valor like the footballing Cronins from Milltown. Other factors that helped to reverse or interrupt the trend, you had the Gaelic League, the GAA, you had writers who said to us, we are not an appendage of England. We are not just in the process of becoming West Britons. We are a unique people with a unique history. We are a people with a language of our own, a poetry of our own, and a history of our own. And there was this idea began to take root, and the GAA tapped into that, and in 1884, the GAA was founded in Hayes's Hotel in Thurles. An interesting presence at that meeting was a man called J. Bracken. His son, he was a very contrary kind of man himself, not easy to get on with, but he had his son Brendan, who was equally contrary, but managed to weave his way around the world, and he finished up in the 1940s as a very important, confident minister in the government of Winston Churchill in London. So from the beginning there, the GAA had influence in very high places. The GAA also began to form clubs all over the country. As it said about an idea, nothing is more irresistible, somebody said once, than an idea that has found its time. The idea that we were a separate nation, that we were a separate people, that we had our own language, we had our own game, we had our own history. The idea now began to take root deeply in the psyche of the Irish people. And from that idea were birthed the GAA, the Gaelic League, Sinn Féin, and other versions expressing our identity as Irish people. In the beginning, the GAA survived a takeover bid from the IRB, or the Fenians. The Fenian movement, most of you might know anyway, in the 1870s, there was an attempt at a rebellion against English rule in Ireland. It wasn't very successful. But what was successful was the ideas it generated. They survived failures into the present day. But the IRB adopted a policy that they would look around the Irish scene, and any movement that promised to widen the gap between Ireland and England, they would support it and become part of it. And they saw in the GAA, they saw in the GAA the potential for influencing the Irish people in the direction towards separation from England. And but that wasn't the plan of the GAA. The plan of the GAA was simply to concentrate on Irish games, Irish athletics, running and so on. And they did that. So in the early days, they managed to overcome this attempt by the IRB to take them over. So as we moved into the last century, the GAA was beginning to assert itself as a very real presence in Ireland. Here in Kerry, we very early on got involved with the GAA. We had a famous Long Rangers Club, which had morphed from being a kind of a rugby club to become a GAA club. And we took to the big ball, you know. Somebody said the reason Kerry became so attached to the big ball, that the place was so hilly and so many rushes around the place, we could never keep ourselves with slitters. So it was easier to find a big ball than trying to find a slitter on the side of a hill. So we concentrated on the football here. Now in Kerry won All Irelands early on, and but for 10 years, between 1914 to 1924, those were the war years, when this country was in turmoil, and Kerry, you know, were not involved in any GAA activities. Then came the Civil War in the early 20s, and that divided brother against brother. The slaughters took place, and the most bloody of the encounters in the Civil War took place here in County Kerry. In 1 month alone, in early 1920, something like 20 men were executed without trial. It was the system at the time. There was an attempt by some, in the eyes of the authorities, to usurp the state. Then in the eyes of the other crowd, it was to usurp the republic. And Kerry was an extremely bitter place when it came to the Civil War. Many atrocities were killed. My own family were very intimately involved in that whole process. And in 1924, the Civil War was over, and you had a lot of Kerry men interned in the internment camps throughout the country, playing football. When these men got out of the jails in 1924, they played the official Kerry team, and actually the game was drawn. It was the first time they decided on a replay, because the first time ever a challenge game was replayed. The internees, as they were called, who had been imprisoned as a result of their Republican activities, played the official Kerry team and drew with won the replay. So it is understandable that there was deep-rooted, and we know that, anger and bitterness in this county. And it is the credit of the GAA that they were very significant in the healing process. And it is to their credit that at no stage did the GAA come down on one side or the other. They maintained a position where they were acceptable to both sides in the Civil War. The Civil War was, that which destroyed in some way the unity which had existed up to that time, but with the GAA, there was a healing process established. In 1924, Kerry won the All-Ireland. Get used to doing these things, Kerry, it's a bit of a habit with over the years. Kerry won the All-Ireland in 24 for the first time with men from both sides, from the treaty side and the anti-treaty side, playing together. One of the leading pro-treaty sides which divided the county was a man from up in North Kerry called Con Brosnan. Con Brosnan was a great footballer. He was the captain in the Free State Army. He was a very, very fine officer and gentleman of the Free State Army. But the real presence in Kerry during those years was a crowd called the Dublin Guard. They were roughly stationed in Tralee, and even their own Kerry comrades found them in a way unacceptable, the methods that they went to. It was the Dublin Guard really that were responsible for the killing in Ballyseedy, outside Tralee and other places. In one couple of weeks alone, 19 men were executed here in Kerry without trial. So, the legacy of that hurt must, have run very deep. And it is to the credit of the GAA that they played a very significant role in healing those divisions. My own father would have took the Republican side. He fought along with John Joe Sheehy. John Joe Sheehy was the Republican side. A couple of years later, John Joe Sheehy and Con Brosnan, two different sides of the Civil War, were together representing Kerry. They sank their difference when it came to the call to represent Kerry. Joe Barrett, who played with Kerry back in around my time, Joe wrote a book called In the Name of the Father, in the name of the game, right? And for the sake of this game of football, these men, sank their differences. Con Brosnan, who was a Free State officer, who won the Civil War, he arranged that men like John Joe Sheehy and Joe Barrett, who were losers in the Civil War, he arranged a safe passage for these men to come and represent the county, and when the game was over, they disappeared out of the city again. So the GAA was very instrumental in healing the rifts that divided this county especially. There was no county in Ireland, I think, that had such a bitter experience as Kerry during the Civil War, but no county, I think, healed as fast because of the influence of the GAA. And the GAA, through the heroes that it threw over the football fields, called men away from the trauma of history, and in the process, these men became figures of history. And it's in that context that I see the Cronin brothers of Lyre. They were above and beyond the ordinary, and they were part of a genre of Irish athletes who had a significance beyond the size or the shape of the ball they played. They had a significance in healing the hurts in this county and indeed all over this land. So it's to the credit of the GAA and to men like the Cronins, who were the heroes of the GAA. I said earlier, I couldn't, I think, overestimate the admiration and awe that I had and have for these Cronin brothers, because in my days in Cork as a young student back in the early 50s, these men were my heroes. We used to go to see Cronins of Milltown play. It was Ned Roach and the Cronins that I would, because of the fact that they were Kerrymen. I used to let those Cork people excuse me, yeah. On a side note, I have only grandchildren, I have three grandsons anyway, and they're all Corkmen.
Hey.
So they have me nearly now shouting for Cork. And speaking of rivalry, there is no doubt at all about it. But this part of the success of the GAA in narrowing and healing the huts in this county was that it united Kerry as it united Cork against the opposition. in Kerry, for Kerry footballers and Kerry supporters, the enemy was no longer the Free State soldiers or the Republican Army. The enemy now was the Cork team, and especially the Dublin team. There was a group of Free State officers in this county in the 1920s. They distinguished themselves, with the ferocity with which they implemented Free State policies in this county. So much so that you had men like Cronin, who was a Free State officer himself, bringing to the Republicans information that they better get out of this place or that place because the Dublin Guard was searching for them. In Kerry, the Dublin Guard became a term of opprobrium, because in the month of March 1923, those weeks, 19 Kerrymen were executed without trial. That was the rule of the day, and that was, the legacy that was left. But in 1954, for the first time since 1914, Kerrymen won the All-Ireland with men from both sides engaged in that effort. When we come to the 1930s, the GAA again was instrumental in healing the divisions that existed in this country, especially in Kerry. There was a famous Kerry footballer in those days, Porty Landers, great Kerry forward. But when I was reading about Jim Cronin on his retirement was interviewed, and he stated that the heroes that he looked up to were men like Joe Barrett and Porty Landers. Porty Landers was a Republican. He was on the side that lost the Civil War, but Jim Cronin held him up as one of his heroes. But Porty Landers held up Jim Cronin as one of his later heroes, but he also said that his admiration for Con Brosnan was second to none, and Con Brosnan was a Free State officer on the other side. So their attachment and their commitment to Kerry and to football, both sides agreed and attempted the process to bring reconciliation. So when we're talking tonight about, when I see tonight talk about the Cronin brothers and the GAA, I'm not just looking at men who played with a particular shape of a football, who played with a round football rather than an oval football. I'm looking at men who rose above the ordinary, who rose above the morass of the masses, and shone on the playing fields of Kerry and of Ireland, and who, by their excellence at that stage and that area, lifted us all in this county and indeed our own to the heights we reached very rapidly after the Civil War. So to men like the Cronins, we in Kerry and indeed Ireland, especially in Kerry, owe a great debt. The Cronins, John Joe Sheehy, Joe Barrett, I could name them all, that hall of famous Kerrymen and Corkmen who lifted us out of the darkness of the Civil War to the unity we enjoy today. So that's about all I have at this time. If anybody has any questions, I'd be prepared to answer them. And Jimmy, now.